white classroom, and and then so on and so on. So I thought that part right there was worth worth having a conversation about. How do teachers who are white teachers who want to have conversations about race with white students, how do they do it? So it's like maybe it's about six different strategies here. One of the strategies is on the left, and then the other five are on the right. So the first strategy is to establish group guidelines with the students. Okay, so that's the first one. Establish group guidelines. So I'll unpack the guidelines in a second, but let me come back to the other strategies. Number two, help students accept. Oops, excuse me. Sorry. Help students accept discomfort and uncertainty. Okay, and you all can do that even with the four agreements. That's one of the reasons why I share the four agreements with folks. To accept the discomfort, and I think that's important, even in our personal lives. I'm just gonna be honest. As I get older, I have to accept this. It's gonna be times in life when I'm not comfortable. That doesn't mean that my life is bad. That doesn't mean that something bad happened to me. That doesn't mean that I'm doing something wrong. But it's just a part of life. I really don't know any other way to say it. I used to hate hearing that when my mother would say that when I was younger, because I always had questions, and she'd say, Carla, you just have to accept it. It's just a part of life. And I was just like, no. But the older I get, I realize that we have to be okay with discomfort. This one is important. Number three, clarify that the goal is not to be colorblind. Please don't promote the color blindness with students, particularly with students who are white. Okay, that's one of those non-racist safe. That's like a safe position. Okay, we're not advocating for that, and I would encourage you all not to promote that line of thinking either. That's a dangerous line of thinking. Acknowledge that learning. Here's another reason why the colorblind theory is problematic, because it upholds privilege. You see, because as a black parent, me and my fiance, my husband, my fiance, we're not going to raise our child to be colorblind. Well, why? Because we don't have that privilege. I can't raise her to say, "Oh, don't see blackness." What? Yeah, that doesn't make sense. So if we're trying to promote equity here, it's not really fair for white people to do that, because that's in doing that, that's upholding privilege. That's a privilege to be able to say that and do that. Um, I was working at a restaurant. I don't know. Do they have that Cracker Barrel, that restaurant called Cracker Barrel in Ohio? Okay. Love Cracker Barrel. I know Cracker Barrel is always under the fire for being racist. I don't care. I love me some good Cracker Barrel. And I used to work at Cracker Barrel when I was in grad school. And I remember this time at the, like, how they have the cashier register like in the main area. So that was my position. And so it was a white woman who comes in with her son, and he had to be, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. And he looked up at me and he's like, "Are you black?" Now, I didn't get offended by that because I don't have a reason to be offended. That's my identity. But his mother's response is what raised the eyebrow for me. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that he would say that. Please forgive us." And I was like, okay, but what's the problem? He didn't say anything wrong, and he didn't do anything wrong. And I never forgot that. And I had to wrestle with that. Like, why does she have a problem with that? And my thinking, I'm just speculating, was that she may have been raising him with a colorblind mindset to not see color. And the minute where he said, "Hey, are you black?" that was outside of probably how she was raising him, and that was why it was a problem. So I don't think he was wrong. I kind of think the parent was a little wrong. There was nothing wrong with what that boy said, and I said, "Yeah, I'm black, just like you're white. Yeah, there's nothing to be embarrassed of. We are who we are." So I didn't, he didn't do anything wrong, and I wish that the mother didn't respond that way either. But whatever. Anyway, clarify that the goal is not to be colorblind. We are not promoting that. We encourage you all to not promote that line of thinking either. Acknowledge that learning about race and racism is a process. Okay, this is particularly important for young people because they're stepping into a line of thinking that has a lot of historical legacies, and so sometimes young people don't always see the big picture. So we have to acknowledge that learning about race and racism is a process. Very important here. Address white privilege in non-defensive, non-attacking ways. So, in other words, if you are white and you want to have conversations with your white students about race, look at white privilege as objectively as possible. As objectively as possible. If it's hard for you to do that as a white person, then that means that you may need to do some of your own unpacking about what white privilege means to you. Okay. And then I have here incorporate lessons where white students can understand themselves as racial and cultural human beings. This is important, right? This goes to the comment that was said earlier, right? Students who are white, students who are black. Okay, so even in switching that language and revisiting that language, that perhaps can help us to understand who we are as racial and cultural beings. I like the last one because sometimes and all of us have seen this, right? You go into the grocery store, they have like the ethnic food aisle, or you go into Barnes and Noble, the black books and that sort of thing. But when corporations do that, that reinforces the assumption, not even the fact, that enforces the assumption that whites do not have a racial or cultural identity. That only people of color have a racial and cultural identity, but not whites. So it's also important for whites to understand that whites have a racial and cultural identity as well, right? Even when you talk to some white people, you say, "Well, where's your family from?" No one says America. They say, "Oh, my folks are from Poland. My folks are from, wherever, Germany, Yugoslavia. I'm not really sure." That is an acknowledgement of the white person's racial and cultural identity, locating the specific nationality of origin. But let's unpack the group discussion guidelines. Okay, so for those of you all who want to have conversations with your students, on the left is like, this is what you should say to the students before having a conversation, kind of like before we go into this. So you want to work with them on listening and interrupting. This is so important. This is so important. We all have work to do in this area, okay? Even I was challenged, okay? Tiffany was on the line, okay? Right? Even I was challenged in this recently where I was interrupting someone, right? Interrupting a black principal who was talking, and someone caught me on it. Like, "Carla, stop interrupting her." Seriously, because we do it so much. But we have to be cognizant of that. Let's be cognizant of that. When people are talking about race and their racial identities, let's practice listening without interruption. We also have to work with our young people on dealing with strong emotions. Even as adults, we need this, okay? Not just young people. As adults, we need to learn how to deal with our emotions when talking about race. We need to establish trust, and this is important. Okay? And this is important, particularly for white teachers who are also teaching in diverse settings. Establishing trust with students is important because we want students to feel safe and comfortable enough to open up. Confidentiality is important. Sharing airtime. I struggle with this one, y'all. I struggle with this one, okay? Talking too much, not letting other people talk. But encourage your students to share airtime with each other, deal with differences or disagreements. And then the last one is important. Establish an environment that allows for mistakes. Okay? Establish an environment that allows for mistakes. I want to pause here just to give myself a bit of a respite, and I want to invite you all. Any comments, reflections? Any folks who have tried to have conversations with race about their students? Anyone want to share any reflections, anything at this point?
I actually had a question about the quote that you shared about silence earlier. I was thinking more on our break about that. And I was thinking about sometimes why I stay silent. And I think that I do it because I'm afraid I'm going to say something wrong or make the problem worse. And so I guess, how do I say something without that fear of that I'm going to make it worse?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Kathleen, I have two things to say. One, I'm glad that you acknowledged that. One, you know, I hope I'm not being disrespectful in telling you this. Do your best just to lose a fear. There's nothing to be afraid of. You know, it's nothing to be afraid of. That takes time. I get that. But just try to tell yourself that. You're not wrong for saying what you need to say. That is your truth. The other thing is that it's hard to really, and I'm even noticing this, it's hard to speak the truth without it sounding politically incorrect. I think right now, all of us as a country, we're struggling with how do we say things that are politically correct. You know, we don't want to be a part of this cancel culture. We don't want people to look at us funny. And then the third thing I would say is to possibly to think about what you want to say before you say it, and to think to keep in mind how it might be interpreted from someone else. Okay, and that's the third part I would say. So if you know that you're going to say something that might be controversial, where you know that some people might agree with you and some people might disagree, just think about and even be prepared to handle how people might receive your comment. I'm a fan of saying what needs to be said. You know, I'm just a fan of that. But I'm also a fan of speaking our truths, but in a way that's not going to offend, that's not going to harm or oppress someone. I don't always know if my words are going to offend someone, but I am cognizant of the extent to which my words can really harm or oppress someone. Does that help, Kathleen?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Because I mean, I'm here, so obviously I believe these conversations need to happen, and we need to be teaching these things. But it's that uncomfortable fear of the unknown a little bit that I'm working hard to get over, and I think it's helping that we're here.
Yeah, I agree so too. I agree. The other thing I want to say, and I just thought about this, that we have to, and I say this with respect to whites. Okay, this is no disrespect. But we have to acknowledge that for the most part, most white people have not grown up in an environment that allows conversations about race or racism. We have to accept that, you know, and it's no judgment or anything. It's just almost a fact, you know, and you have to say that to yourself. Like, and that's why I was asking you all to do the autobiography. Like, if you can say to yourself, like, if I'm a white person, and if I grew up in a predominantly white, you know, area neighborhood, went to school with predominantly white students, had predominantly white teachers, and in K through 8. And if those conversations about race and racism never happened, okay, those are conversations that did not happen. Moving on up, high school, we have to think about how many opportunities have folks had to have conversations about race and racism in high school. Probably not a lot. Moving on up to college. If you went to college and went to school, had professors who were white, most of your friends in college were white, how often did you all talk about race and racism? Probably not a lot. When you go to church, okay, when you go to the bank, any places, probably not a lot. And the conversations that were had about race and racism were probably, you know, biased. You know, it was probably negative. It was probably not a conversation to say how can we get to some common ground? How can we make meaning? Or how can we, you know, address an issue? A lot of times that just doesn't happen. So we have to understand that for you all who might be on the line, you also have to think about your age. Okay, we're talking about you all, us who are probably in our 30s, maybe even 40s or 50s. We're now saying that we've lived, you know, 40 years and have not really had some really serious opportunities to unpack race and racism. So, Kathleen, the questions or any challenges that you're having, that really anyone is having right now, should probably be considered normal. Really, it's all normal. Even to just be here. What you just said, Kathleen, that needs to be commended. Because for some people, even just coming here, saying that, okay, I'm going to listen to this Black woman talk to me about race and racism. For some people, that's a lot. Because you have to think about how many opportunities has this happened where a Black person has come in as sort of like the expert or the authority to help unpack or challenge our ways of thinking about race and diversity. It probably has not happened a lot. This probably is the first time for some of you all. So all of that is also a part of all of this. So it's all love. For me, I'm just glad that we're having this conversation. That's how I look at it. I'm not here trying to shame or, I'm just trying to say, how can we have these conversations? For me, I'm excited. I'm glad that people are willing to come out of their shells. I'm glad that Kathleen just shared what she shared. I just wish that more people had more courage. That's really the most I can say. I'm not shaming or anything. I just wish that more people had more courage. How we can promote folks to be more courageous, I think that's another conversation to be had. But it's a growth process. Everybody's at different levels. All right. Strategies for engaging young people in conversations about race, K through 5. This is important. Okay. And I also want to say this. My professional opinion, my personal and professional opinion, I don't think it's a good idea to introduce the babies to heavy conversations about racism. Just my opinion. Why do I say that? Because young people need to understand themselves as cultural beings in a positive, affirming light. So, even for me as a parent, I don't know if I'm going to have conversations with my daughter about racism at an early age. Because what I'm saying to her is then she's now beginning to understand her racial identity from a place of oppression, from a place of struggle. I want her to understand her racial identity from a place of positivity, from a place of love, from a place of acceptance, not like struggle and oppression. She has her whole life as a Black girl to deal with that and unpack that. I'm just keeping it real. So as she's a younger baby, I'm going to focus on teaching her how to love and accept her Blackness. And so as teachers, that would be my opinion. That would be my professional opinion. Teach children how to positively accept their identities. Even for children who are white. White children should not grow up thinking that they should be guilty about being white. That's not what we're doing here. White children need to see themselves as citizens, as beings who can love and accept another child for who they are. And Black children, Latino children, Asian children need to have the same mindset. So focus on lessons in curriculum that affirm cultural and racial pride. Teach students the positive, culturally affirming aspects of their racial identity. I should have said racial identity. Sorry about that. And then the third will educate children on how to positively resolve differences. And I have interracially and intra-racially. This is also important. This is kind of going a bit deeper, right? But teaching children how to resolve differences with other racial groups and then within their own racial groups. Okay, for the big babies, grades 6 through 12. Consider the racial composition of your classroom, okay? Don't assume that students of color are always willing to have conversations about race. I think that's important. Define and clarify terms of vocabulary. Connect the past to the present. I forgot to type here at the bottom. I'm sorry. Understand perspectives, and then incorporate lessons that teach students how to